the American century as a result, no question. I think that what happened was it just got out of control. And look, from 1928, talk about miracles, from 1928 to September of 1929, the stock market was up 90%, Ray. But I'm saying in terms of the, how did we get from 1929 to 25% unemployment and 9,000 banks failing in 1932, 1933? That was a series of dominoes of terrible just errors of judgment. No? So where are we now? Because I look at what's happening today with what seems like an AI bubble of some sort. I mean, we're spending extraordinary amounts of money, somewhat indiscriminately, without sort of an ROI plan.
达利欧表示，所有重大泡沫，如1929年大萧条、2008年金融危机，都遵循一个相似模式，由债务、宽松信贷和对新技术奇迹的狂热共同催生。当前，面对 AI 等新热潮，同样的泡沫模式似乎正在重演。
In the 1920s, that dream sort of became a get-rich-quick fantasy, if you will, which is a bit of what the dream looks like maybe today.
So I'm going to put in my part of it because you covered it, I think, very well, but you haven't brought it up yet. Okay, there is always the new technological miracles that will change everything, and they really are amazing technological miracles. So, for example, you dealt with the combination of credit and automobiles. We didn't have automobiles, but every man was going to have an automobile, and Ford's Model T, and then, as you mentioned it, General Motors and Ford. Okay, automobiles. Electrification. This was the time that people didn't have electricity. And then we're going to have electricity. And then, can you imagine? You didn't have cars, and if people are going to have cars, people are going to have electricity. And there's General Electric, which then becomes a very, very hot stock. And we didn't have communication. So there was radio, and then the beginning of the idea of television. Can you imagine? Communication that way, radio and television. And that's why we had RCA.
That was like the NVIDIA of its time. It was like the meme stock of its time. Yep.
Can you, because it makes sense, like, wow, radio and TV, and RCA was exactly as you say, and planes, aviation. We didn't have aviation at the time. So now you're going to have that. And we had motion pictures. Okay, this is the first time we had motion pictures. Fox and Warner Brothers were the hot stocks. So it was a miracle that I would say was more exciting, seemed more exciting at the time. If you imagine all of these miracles happening, that you're going to have all the things that electricity and radio and airplanes and cars, all of that happen, it would make sense that all of those miracles would be these miracle stocks. And then you can buy them all on credit. And so isn't that logical that there's all of those miracles?
Oh, and this became the American century as a result, no question. I think that what happened was it just got out of control. And look, from 1928, talk about miracles, from 1928 to September of 1929, the stock market was up 90%, Ray. So if you were buying any stocks with some margin or 10-to-1 margin, I mean, it was like free money.
Okay, so now what we have is credit, debt, okay, and a miracle. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot depends on how expensive the stock were. Almost all these stocks went up, as you described, and then we had the next major ingredient, like tight money starts to come in. Okay, interest rates naturally go up because maybe there's too much credit, and then also maybe the desire to put a little bit of the brakes on, right? So here we have three important ingredients, okay, of that classic, right? We have the credit to finance the miracle and a little bit of top money. As I go back and I look at this and I see the panic of 1907 and I see the Japan bubble and I see all the other bubbles, they all have those ingredients. And so you must see, when you did this 2008 comparisons with that, right?
100%. Think about subprime. Subprime was the equivalent of buying stock on margin at the time. I mean, that was and housing was everywhere. So every time you're right. I hadn't actually thought about it exactly like that. I always think debt is the sort of the match that lights the fire, but it also is, I think, the piece that you've just described, which is this idea that there's some kind of magic, something about to happen that gets everybody excited. And it's a combination of those two with then somebody trying to break the magic. And maybe that's the Fed. But the Fed, by the way, in 1929 didn't fully try to break the magic. And maybe that was part of their problem. You know, they were trying to slam the brakes on, but they didn't really know how, and they were very worried about the politics of it.
Interest rates went up, and the bubble went.
Yep, that is true. That is true.
And that's the same as in Japan. If I look at Japan, it's the same as the South Sea bubble. It's the same as the railroad bubble in the Panic of 1873. Okay, it's interesting, the comparison. So, of course, I'm into the mechanics of what goes on, and you're into the story, but they're both fantastic. So when you draw your comparison between 2008 and 1929 and those two periods, and now, what are your thoughts?
Well, so I think of 1929 as a series of dominoes. The first domino being the crash itself, or maybe you could say a little bit of the tight money that might have led a little bit to the crash. But then there was a series of policy errors on the other end, fiscal fiscal, monetary, and otherwise. You know, Hoover was trying to raise taxes. He's implementing tariffs at the time because he's trying to make good on this pledge he made to farmers to get himself elected the first time around that he's got to do it. You have the Fed not flooding the system with money. You have, Andrew Mellon, who was the Treasury Secretary.
Until it did.
But I'm saying in terms of the, how did we get from 1929 to 25% unemployment and 9,000 banks failing in 1932, 1933? That was a series of dominoes of terrible errors of judgment. No?
Well, when we say that, it always happens the same way to me. Okay. What happens is you have what we talked about in the bubble, the debt, everything going on, and then most classically, you have a tightness of money. And then debt ceases to be a money. So what you have is from 1929, you have the bust, and then you come down into March of 1933, because then what happened is you have all this debt. Debt is a promise to deliver money. Money was gold. Mm-hmm. And then you had the Federal Reserve. You had Roosevelt get on the radio. Right. Just like Nixon got on the television in 1971, Roosevelt gets on the radio and he says, we're not going to give you. Mm-hmm. And then you have the easing, the big easing. And in all of those cycles, you have the gold market then go through the roof because gold is an alternative market.
But interestingly, then if you look at 2008, and I think what's different about 2008 in a way is Ben Bernanke, who you know very well, and wrote his PhD thesis at Princeton on 1929 and the Great Depression. I think he compresses that timeline effectively by flooding the system with money.
In 2008, it was the first time that interest rates hit zero since 1933. Okay, and what did they do when they hit zero? The Fed came in and bought a lot of debt, started to monetize debt. Same in 1933, same in 2008. So it was the same action. It was quicker. Each time has been quicker. But the sequence is the same. In other words, Bernanke came in. Right. We had monetization, debt monetization, central bank buying bonds, and
so if the Fed had done that in 1930, would have we gotten to 9,000 banks going under and 25% unemployment in 1932?
We wouldn't have. If you look at the patterns are the same, and the gaps between them are that gap. In other words, okay, how long does it take for them to come in and make money available so it's easier to pay off the debt, and then the gold market all rallies all through that because now you have cheaper money, and but now you have the gold market rally.
So here's the thing that I think about, and I'm curious where you land. I think we've become better at handling the crisis on the back end, meaning once the crisis happens, we are faster and maybe more efficient in rescuing the system while creating all sorts of other problems along the way, which we can discuss. But we haven't figured out how to deal with the front end of a crisis.
Well, I would put it the following way. What we do is we all know, and we know now, easy money is the cure-all. Okay? So, you want to make things go up? Easy money. So now we have that kind of element of problem. All right, right now, what we're doing is talking about significantly easing monetary policy. While we have the stock market at the peak, the gold market's going through the roof, and we have that. Okay, what's the cure-all? Easy money. Okay, until it's not. Then you have to put on the brakes, and then you have the pop. It's not easy.
So where are we now? Because I look at what's happening today with what seems like an AI bubble of some sort. I mean, we're spending extraordinary amounts of money, somewhat indiscriminately, without sort of an ROI plan necessarily. Does that mean that we end up in the same soup or not?
The dynamic, if you follow the pattern, is there's a debt money dynamic, and then there's the stimulus dynamic. I mean, it would look to me like you're not going to have tight money suit. You're going to have more easy money suit, right? And you're going to have less regulation. So, the Elizabeth Warren is losing, all right?
Yes.
And then also you have very big wealth gaps, right? Because the unicorn makers are making a lot of money, and then you have the big wealth gaps. And so you have the people who are making money also in the stock market and so on, where the others are not participating. They're okay. So you have the big wealth gaps and that dynamic. So what I would think is, I think it's going to be easy money.
Oh. Well, but here's one other thing that's different about 1929 and now, and even 2008 and now, which is the deficit. The deficit is enormous. I mean, we had a budget surplus in 1929. Budget surplus. The whole dynamic was completely different back then. So we could handle, you would think that we could handle some of these shocks. Today, you would think it would be so much more dangerous. Well, maybe it's not. I don't know.
What we have here now is the private sector had a lot of the debt. Now the government sector has a lot of the debt. Still, we got a lot of the debt. And so now it's the government sector that's the one in the debt, but we got a lot of the debt. The debt moves around and so on, but we got it in the government sector. And so that's a difference, but we still have the debt, and it still means one man's debts are another man's assets. And when the assets are not as appealing as the alternative assets, but you have to pay the debt, then you have to have some sort of monetization. I didn't mean to get us, but these patterns just happen in all of those bubbles, so I just can't help myself. So on the stories, though,